started here. So to start the evening, we're just going to review our emergency evacuation procedures from the clerk, Judy Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Just some housekeeping items. In the event that the fire alarm sounds, everyone must evacuate the building immediately. This would be a mandatory evacuation. Designated municipal staff will aid in facilitating this evacuation. During the evacuation, all councillors, municipal employees, and visitors seated to the right of the mayor will exit out exit E, which is located just behind the mayor's seat. All visitors seated in the section directly in front of the mayor and the section to the left will exit out exit D, which is located just outside the council chamber entrance to the right. In the event the fire is blocking one of these exits, as an alternative, exit C is located to the left when exiting out council chambers just down the hallway. Anyone located in room 212, council lounge, or the hallway should use exit C as their primary exit. If this is blocked by the fire, they should utilize exit D, which is located just outside the chambers. Once everyone is outside the building, should proceed to the parking lot of the Kent Club, located just next to the Civic Center, until the fire department has determined it is safe to re-enter the building. Also, please ensure that all cellular phones and pagers are switched to a non-audible function during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And welcome, everyone, to the Budget 2019 introduction night. Tonight, we'll have a somewhat brief overview of the budget draft as put forward by administration. And this is a starting point for the process over the next few weeks. It's the responsibility, of course, of the Budget Committee to finalize this budget, and it's the responsibility of Council outside of this committee to set strategic priorities and make decisions throughout the year that become the backbone of this process. We're dealing with a changing environment provincially and municipally, and this committee over the next 4 years will be challenged to effectively invest in our community while striving to maintain affordability across the municipality. While the budget is an annual process, the effects of good budgeting are not realized only in the short term. The decisions we make should and need to take into account the future needs of our community. Before we begin, I want to thank those that worked hard over the past few months to put this draft budget together, and that will provide important and succinct, if not brief, presentations during deliberations. And I want to reiterate again that this is a draft document and there's still ample time for public input. Of course, you can pick up the phone and call a member of council, send an email, tweet at us, or if you prefer a more public format, there's a series of information night open houses. They start at 4:30 and run to 6 o'clock. Tuesday, January the 22nd, will be in Dresden at the Ken Houston Memorial Agricultural Center and in Tilbury at the Arena. Wednesday, in Blenheim at the high school and in Wallsburg at the Wallsburg Municipal Office. And on Thursday, January 24th, at the Active Lifestyle Center in Chatham. So those will be opportunities for both an open house and then a more formal presentation with an opportunity for questions. Also, during the budget deliberations, members of the public can make deputations. Those will be occurring January 30th, 31st, and February 5th. You can find out more information about all of this on the municipal website, and I'm sure many of your councillors will share that information on social media as well. So now I'm going to turn over the mic to Gord for a brief presentation.
Thank you, Brock. I'm Gord Quinton, Director of Budget and Performance Services. And last year we did put together 3 simple videos that we have under the financial information section of our website, and it's on our YouTube channel as well. This one explains how a municipal budget works. We have one on what is assessment growth and how does that work, and one on how taxes work, where you have your assessment times your tax rate, and explains on how all that works. So they're interesting videos. We're not going to show all 3, but I'm first going to start the meeting with a 4-minute video on how your municipal budget works.
Okay, I would like to help you understand how your municipality develops its budget. We always hear about them, and often this can feel like another language altogether. Before we get started, there is important information you should know. Ontario municipalities like Chatham-Kent receive only 9% of all taxes collected, but are responsible for over 50% of the infrastructure. Let's start by looking at what the word budget means. Simply put, it's a planned, itemized summary of money that is coming into the municipality and how that money is spent for a specific period of time. It's very important to note that provincial legislation in Ontario states money coming in equals money going out, also known as revenue equals expenditures or a balanced budget. The municipality of Chatham-Kent provides hundreds of services to the residents of Chatham-Kent, so council and administration always have to make difficult decisions to ensure this balancing takes place. There are two main components of the budget when looking at the money going out side of the scale. Operating pays for all the day-to-day activities of the corporation. This includes items such as salaries and wages, utilities, supplies, fuel, and insurance, just to name a few. The capital budget pays for all the new big investments or the rehabilitation of current assets under the municipality's control. So let's focus on how the municipality collects to pay for all these services. For every dollar that comes into the city, 50 cents comes from property taxes, 38 cents from grants and subsidies, and 12 cents from user fees and other sources. So, now we've learned what a budget is, how municipalities collect money, and how they spend it. Now let's take a look at how these pieces work together. Money comes in through property taxes, grants and subsidies, and user fees. The money collected is required for both the operating and capital budget. We've already talked about the operating budget, including day-to-day expenses, but it also includes money for funding capital budgets. The capital budget pays for all the new big investments or the rehabilitation of current assets under the municipality's control. This connection is made through three methods. The capital levy method reflects a pay-as-you-go approach. The reserve fund method, which reflects a planned save now, acquire, or use later approach, and the debt payment approach. Okay, so let's recap. 1. A budget is a plan for money coming in and money going out. There are two building blocks to the municipal budget, operating and capital. 2. The operating budget is like paying your house bills to keep the lights on. Just like in a normal household, our bills go up with inflation. 3. The capital budget is like your major outlays, vehicles, house, renovations, etc. 4. Money comes in from three sources: property tax levy, user fees, and grants and subsidies. 5. Money coming in is used to deliver hundreds of services to municipal residents. 6. Council and administration, with the input of the public, decide how to best balance the municipal budget guided by provincial legislation. And that is how your municipality develops its budget.
And now we'll turn it over to Don.
Thank you, Budget Chair. Good evening. My name is Don Shropshire. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the municipality. And I'm going to walk you through the highlights of the budget and to give you an opportunity of the big picture before we start drilling into some of the more specifics. So over the past 3 years, Council has supported a general direction to try and keep our budget changes in line with our consumer price index or the price of inflation. Certainly that's for the operating budget, and all of those changes that we've recommended or Council has approved over the past 3 years have been consistent with making those adjustments to keep in line with inflation and also to contribute to our asset management plan. The current budget that we're presenting today is we're tabling a budget for Council's consideration that's going to be in the range of 1.7 to 2.03%. And that's unusual. Most of the time, administration will come in with a specific budget. We've been given indications by the Minister of Finance that the province of Ontario was considering a reduction in the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. That's the OMPF fund that's noted on the slide. And depending on what that range or change in reductions might be, it will impact our range. But initially, the staff came in with a 1.7% recommended change. With the information, we're saying that might be in the up to 2.03%. Included in the figures, I'll just use the 2% just for simplicity and not go back and forth, but included in the 2% is a 1% increase in the annual funding for our infrastructure. with that capital component. Council has been taking consistent steps to fund our infrastructure so we can make sure that we can maintain that over time. We're still not funding it to what it should be, and consequently, we hear sometimes that we're now not able to do all of the work that we would like to do, and it's because that we still haven't funded that fully. But Council is making changes in that direction. An additional $550,000 was approved by Council. This is the third of 3 years where we've increased the base budget by $550,000 specifically to maintain our bridge infrastructure. We have more bridges and culverts. That's a short bridge is a culvert. We have more of those than any other municipality in the province, and they're expensive to maintain. Also included in the 2% target is Council approved last year an increase in the ambulance funding. And so that increase of the 12-hour shift for ambulance funding has now been baked into the recommended increase for the base budget for this year. And also, Council has had some previous decisions or requisitioning bodies, such as the conservation authorities, have demanded that we have some additional cost increases, and those have also been built into the budget. But just to draw your attention to that OMPF funding announcement, we're hoping that that will be available before we are in a position to confirm the budget, but we can't guarantee that. The 4 areas you see here is Council approved the CK Plan 2035, the long-term strategic plan for the municipality. Those are the 4 major areas of consideration that Council would typically make investments in. The way each of these reads is basically within 1 generation, we'd be in a position to make these specific changes. So when administration's preparing the budget for Council's consideration, we focus on what we believe the long-term strategic focuses are that Council believes is important to have a balanced growth and sustain our community. Next slide, please. There's 3 additional critical success factors. Maintaining, not only are we doing investments, but we're also maintaining the financial sustainability of the municipality, paying down our debt, making sure that we, as the budget presentation or the video showed, that we're making sure that we're making the right balanced decisions so that we have strong financial sustainability in the long term. We can pay our way, maintain a balanced budget, but also put enough money in the reserves or our debt financing, whatever Council chooses to approve in terms of trying to maintain our infrastructure. We also want to maintain open, transparent government. Part of this process and having all these discussions in an open forum allow taxpayers to identify how the monies are being invested and gives you an opportunity to understand that and to ask questions of your elected officials. And lastly, we look at resiliency, and any good budget plan has to make sure that we have enough money in the budget so that we can take advantage of opportunities that might be presented, but we also are in a position where we can respond when there's a crisis. So as an example, the flooding that occurred earlier this year, or probably in 2018, that cost some additional funding to make sure that our citizens their safety and their property was protected, and that's where some of the resiliency piece might come in. Similarly, there could be an opportunity to actually invest in something that would be for the benefit of our community, so we have to make sure that's considered as well. Next slide, please. So Council has an opportunity to establish priorities. So even though we've got that CK Plan 2035, every term of Council, we ask Council to identify what the priorities are going to be. What do they want the administration to focus on that's of particular import to Council? And these are the current priorities that were set by the last term of Council. We are on a 4-year planning cycle, and for new councils that have just been elected in December, they're going to have an opportunity to set the next priorities for the majority of their term, but we're going to have that discussion take place after this budget has been considered. So basically, these were the priorities: the jobs, people, health, and financial sustainability that were established by the last term. And similarly, our current council will have an opportunity to set the next 4-year term. But you'll have the benefit of having this budget debate and understand the sort of the scope of our services before you establish your priorities. Next slide, please. There's a number of factors. We had a discussion last week with the BMA study, and it highlighted some of the challenges and things that we have to consider. Some of our challenges as a community: we have relatively low assessment growth. That has been tracking upwards. This past year, our assessment growth was on pace with inflation. We had a very, very similar amount for our assessment growth. But some of our challenges historically have been a relatively sluggish economy for the last 10 years, and we're happy to see that starting to change. We also have a very low population density for the size of our community, so we have relatively few people that have to maintain a very large expanded infrastructure. We have 43 people per square kilometer. That's, in comparison, Windsor has over 1,560 people per square kilometer. It's a whole lot easier to maintain your infrastructure when you're more densely populated, but that's part of our challenge, and again, our significant infrastructure. On the flip side, Chatham-Kent has been realizing some very strong economic development growth. Looks like we're starting to turn the corner on resident attraction and retention. Our population's showing every sign that it's starting to increase. And Council has made very proactive decisions with respect to our financial sustainability, asset management planning, and our financial plan. And all of those financial factors that can be controlled by the municipality, we've done an extremely good job, and we're in good position as a result. Another piece that administration wants to draw Council's attention to in particular is any consideration for changes in staffing recommendations are looked at very, very closely. We've had a number of areas where we had significant debate over the course of the fall. We wanted to highlight these, so there's no doubt that these are something that needs to be considered closely by Council. But just to give you a brief highlight, and we'll have a chance to drive into this over the course of the next couple of weeks, environmental sustainability was identified by Council as a priority. There has not been any dedicated resources in the past to address that issue, so there's some 2 resources under environmental sustainability that are being recommended. We've had a number of different reorganizations over the past 3.5 years. We've actually reduced the size of our executive management team, but as a result, we're looking to try and increase some resources for our senior management team to look at a combination of succession planning and also provide some bench strength for some areas that we think are particularly critical and in need of attention. And lastly, our system improvement areas. There's 2 positions there that we think are particularly important, and these are to look at when we're considering making other investments in different areas, these allow us to be as efficient as possible and to make sure that they're integrated into our other activities and services. So those will be discussed in detail, and there's briefing notes on all of the different staffing positions. Budget Chair, that's the conclusion of my highlight or overview of the budget. I'd like to pass the microphone back to Mr. Turner, who will go through it in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to thank our budget team that are over here. We've got Dennis and Peter and Chris and Sandra, and of course Gord, who did all the work over the last number of months helping to compile the documents that we're all working with. And in the back room we have Maria pinch hitting for tonight. The other thing I wanted to talk about was over the last couple of weeks we've had a significant number of base budget reviews where we've actually looked at the detailed levels of the 2018 budget. And we had open meetings with the councillors. We had a significant turnout of councillors to come. We had great conversations, some wonderful questions, examining options to, where we may want to go, trying to get a good feel for the services that we provide. So a really great participation through the council. So I just wanted to thank them for their attendance over the last week or so. That really helps prepare the table for the discussions that we're going to have over the next couple of weeks. And then we'll get into some of the presentations. So in October of 2015, we brought forward the long-term financial strategy. And there was some principles that we wanted to bring in that we felt that would be beneficial for council to have ongoing financial sustainability, which is kind of a key thing for all businesses to actually have to operate. So one of the things is that one-time costs should be funded with one-time revenue. So you'll hear us talking about some e-funding items. That's what we're doing is we're taking those items that we're just spending for once when we actually do them, and they're being funded from a reserve or from another source. Sustainable funding for replacement of facilities and strategic objectives. So we had no base budget funding for some of these items, so we've had items brought forward in that plan for to increase that budget by a 1% over 10 years, so a 0.1% increase in those two budget items. And that provides council with a lot of flexibility going forward. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those in the future. And then the last one is the asset management plan that we brought forward in January of 2018, which is the 2017 asset management plan. Associated with that was a financing plan. And basically that's indicating to bring forward a percentage increase each year for the next 20 years to get us to a sustainable level where we're actually have funding coming in that actually covers our life cycle requirements for all of our different assets. And the principle behind that is so that you're not actually trying to, fund things that through debt where you have to do that. You have the funding available to be able to do the required maintenance to keep our assets in the best possible outcomes for all of them. So the other major components of variability in the tax budget process, we've talked a little bit about these. And basically, so there's new tax assessment that brings in new revenues. Council decides on the level of services that we provide in the community, and that can dictate what taxation we need. And then the revenues, taxes, and user fees are what's accumulated to actually bring that money in. So we talked a little bit about the new tax assessment. So our new tax assessment for 2019 is terrific. It's $2.1 million, which is higher than our estimated budget. But as you can see when we get into that slide in details, that there was a significant amount of that was from the wind turbines, and a significant amount of it was from the new pipeline that was twinned from Union Gas. But we still did have some growth compared to other years, but Gord's going to cover that in a later slide. So here's our agenda tonight. So we're going to do a budget overview, a little bit of background information, some tax information, the 2019 budget information. We're going to touch on infrastructure. We're going to do a quick overview on reserves, talk about some of the staffing recommendations, a little bit of other information, and some next steps. Then we're going to get into the deputations, and then we'll have some discussion on the draft budget presentation. So for 2019, we were all internally tasked with meeting a budget target of CPI of 1.8% for all of our operational needs, and to approve the infrastructure spending, which was currently approved in the financing model that was approved as the asset management plan of the 1%. We also had to address the 0.37% approved from council decisions and any requisitioning body requests that are carried into the 2019 budget. And then we're going to continue that funding for the financing plan, for the asset management plan, plus we also have the third year of the 3-year bridge infrastructure funding plan of $550,000. So those decisions that were affecting 2019, in 2013 we eliminated $500,000 of salt out of that budget. We're continuously short on our salt budget each year. Our intention would be to bring forward a quarter of that each year for the term of council. To try and balance it over the 4 years, so we're bringing in $125,000 into that one. Our share of the 12-hour ambulance shift, so it's twice that much, but the Ministry of Health is hopefully paying for the other half. As we've mentioned a number of times, that we're still waiting on provincial funding announcements. Same with the OMPF, and in all areas we are still waiting, so we're hopeful to hear some information very soon on some of these, but we understand some of them we may not hear until late March or April. The other couple items are smaller items. We had built a soccer canteen. This is just rolling the life cycle maintenance in. We had removed a special event late fee, and that's kind of the offset of the revenues that we were collecting on that. And then the live streaming of council meetings that was approved. So that's another piece that we brought into the base. So we have these 3 items that are going to be discussed during the budget deliberations. So Councillor Harrigan, Councillor Thompson, and the Mayor have all brought forward some items for discussion in the deliberations. These items are not included in our budget. When EMT had made their final recommendations, that was wrapped up before the new term of councils even began. But here's just some of those items. So when we actually get into the budget deliberations, we will actually bring up a slide. We would require a motion from the floor, from generally the councillors and the mayor on those items. to be discussed for during the budget, and whether they're included into the budget or not would be pending council's direction. I realize this is a little bit small, but this is basically the overview of the 2019 draft budget. So you can see these two lines on the left-hand side. So this is where we started the budget before EMT discussions. So you can see that we had 1.17% subtotal for existing services. Strategic investments, there was another 4.21%. One-time requests of 3.36, and then the asset management funding of 0.43. So we were at about a 9.14% tax increase at the start of our deliberations with EMT. As we went through it, you can see that there was some savings of $554,000 that came out of the base budget. A lot of that was money that we had put into the base budget in 2018 based on the Bill 148 changes that the Liberal government had brought in. The Conservative government reversed a significant amount of those items, so we were able to take those items back out of the budget. You can see the Ontario Municipal Partnership Funding Grant is in there as $500,000. The $500,000 was based upon the history of the last 2 years, where they had actually taken some of this transitional funding and moved it into the program. We had received a little bit more than $500,000 over each of those 2 years, so all things being equal, we were anticipating getting $500,000. With the recent announcement that there will likely be a reduction in OMPF funding, that's the $500,000 that we're talking about that's causing us to give you a range of 1.7 to 2.03, because if we lose that increase in funding, obviously we won't be getting new revenues, so that would add the 0.33% back in to the budget. So that's the whole range that we're talking about. So as you can see, after we did our EMT deliberations, we came in at the 1.7%. And then the OMPF piece potentially makes it 2.03. I have a conference call on next Wednesday with the province, hoping to hear more information on the OMPF. So hopefully by the January 30th meeting, we'll be able to provide some new information on that line item. So basically, the tax budget, we've kind of showed it a little bit as the 1.7 and the 2.03. So you can see that the changes for the municipal departments themselves have added about 0.54%. Council decisions and the uncontrollable items is the 0.37 we talked about earlier. The police budget is adding 0.36, so we're at about 1.27. We're adding 0.43% based on the asset management plan. We'll get into the specifics on why it's 0.43% that we're adding to the tax base instead of the whole 1%. So that shows that it's about a 1.7% increase. And that's an annual impact of an average household in Chatham-Kent of about $48, or about 94 cents a week. If it did go up to the 2.03, it would be about $58, or $1.11. So this is just a quick highlight to show kind of the number of customers that we have. So it shows the breakdown of the different classes that we have, and it shows the hydro, water, and sewer customers. This is a breakdown of our 2018 revenues. So you can see that our tax amount that we bring in is about 48.9% of all of the revenues that we bring in. And the other revenues are, the grants that we receive, user fees, that type of thing. On the right-hand side, it basically shows the percentages that we receive of that amount. You can see that the provincial funding is 36%, so you can see why we're quite anxious to hear more information on that funding, as it's a significant amount of our funding. This is a breakdown of the various expenses we have. So you can see that employee-related expenses are about 41.7%. Our infrastructure and contracted work is about 28% in total. Human services benefits, which is a lot of the items that are in April's area, is about 17.7%, and then you can see a few minor other areas that are listed there as well. This slide is the slide that goes out with everybody's tax bill inserts. It's basically indicating if your house was the average house in Chatham-Kent of an average assessment of $165,000 and your average taxes would be $28.35 for the municipal portion. It shows you all the different departments, and it shows you how much of your tax bill goes towards the various items. So you can see, like in infrastructure and engineering services, which includes public works and drainage and engineering and rec facilities, parks and open spaces, $1,064. You can see that, if you're looking at, community development, you got fire and emergency services of $362, which includes fire services and emergency planning and ambulance. Community development is $39, and then a bunch of smaller items. So it just gives you an idea on where your tax dollars are actually being spent. This slide is an important slide because it shows you where we have spent our money over the last 10 years and what money has come in over the last 10 years. So you can see that the highest one in the left in the blue, 18.8%, is for infrastructure spending. So over the last 10 years, we've directed an 18.8% increase in infrastructure spending. Our total change in revenues brought in is 27.9%. So you can see that the vast majority of it is going there. Those revenues that come in, 18.5% of it is coming from tax increases, and 9.4% of it is coming from the assessment growth. So it's highlighted a little better on this slide. But as you can see, the net infrastructure investment of 18.8%, over that time our tax rate is only up 18.5%. So the actual change for existing services has actually gone down 0.3% over that 10-year period. So we're averaging only a 1.85% tax increase over that time frame. It's all being put into infrastructure. And CPI over that same time frame is 15.8%. So this is just a quick overview of our debt. So you can see that the debt that's recovered through our rates, through the PUC and through our taxes, is $44 million for the PUC rates, so that's through your water and wastewater, and only $14.5 million is actually recovered through your taxes. This $18 million that's under locals is money that's either coming from local improvements or it's coming through money that comes from the province. For example, they're contributing towards their funding of the Riverview Gardens debt. So the total amount of debt that's outstanding at the end of 2018 was only $76 million. And this just kind of gives you a quick target on how this is being repaid. So you can see that after we get through the end of 2019, the only debt that's going to be outstanding is going to be for Riverview Gardens and the Bradley Center. So Council's made terrific decisions over the last number of years, reducing the debt, not issuing new debt, and certainly it's a strategy to try to only issue debt if you're actually getting a new major asset, and try not to do it for any ongoing expenditures. So this is our financial position. So you can see quickly that the $307 million that we actually have in assets versus our liabilities of only $206 million means that we have a net asset position of $101 million, which is a great place to be in because it puts you in a solid financial position to ensure that there's funding available for ongoing operations and any unfunded liabilities that we have. So this trend has been moving in the right direction for the past 6 years, which is also another great sign of financial sustainability. So what is the bottom line with our financial position? It will remain healthy as long as we fully fund our operating decisions. Some of the challenges that we have, though, are sustained pressure on these operating requirements are the infrastructure funding. We're still significantly less than our requirements. Provincial regulations and requirements and the potential to changes to funding programs. Over the last number of years, there's been some freezing of funding on certain health and community human services levels of funding. The declining non-residential tax base. So over the last number of years, we've had a number of plant closures, and recently we've had a number of significant assessment appeals through a lot of big box stores and that type of thing. Arbitration awards and emergency services, and our medium household incomes are low. So those are all some of the challenges that we have. And now I'm going to turn it over to Gord.
Thank you, Mike. I'm just going to go through the next few slides, starting off with some tax information. The numbers that you see here are slightly different than what was on the tax insert from last year, and that's because this information on the next few slides is taken from the 20. BMA gets their data directly from MPAC, and their calculations is that an average house is $168,300 in Chatham-Kent. which would pay $2,850 of municipal taxes, $286 of school board taxes, for a total of $3,136,000. So I'd like to compare the average house in Chatham-Kent to the provincial average, or the average in the BMA, provincial average in the BMA study, which was made up of those other 107 participants in the study. So this is a comparison of an average 1,200 square foot home. So it's a very modest home, 2 or 3 bedrooms, single car garage. It is a smaller home. In Chatham-Kent would have, on average, a value of $168,000, where across the province that house would be, that exact same house would be worth $273,000. We do have a higher tax rate in Chatham-Kent because that assessment, our houses are assessed lower, so we need a higher rate to offset that. So when you take our rate of 1.86% times that 168,000, a Chatham-Kent average house pays the $3,136 of taxes. Across the province, they have a higher value, but it will be a lower tax rate. And on average, through the BMA study, they said the average of the rest of the communities pay $3,397. So we're $261 lower than those 107 houses in the BMA study. And I just want to emphasize, this is the same house that looks the exact same. You take a picture of it here, it'd be the exact same house in that other community, and there's the same things on their street. There's street lights, there's sidewalks, there's a road, there's a sewer, there's storm sewers, there's a park down the road, a library, a fire station, ambulance. It's the same services, although one town might have one little thing here and another one thing there. 95% of the services are the same across Ontario. I'll quickly go through these next slides. They are from the BMA study, but I want, as some people are viewing this that did not see Monday's council meeting, I'll just quickly go through them. This is a single-family dwelling. The comparison in Chatham-Kent versus the lines on the screen is a smaller group, and the survey average, which is in green. As you can see, I have to switch. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we're both below the survey and group average for a household. For a commercial shopping center, Chatham-Kent was higher than the survey average, but lower than the group average here. And industrial, we're on the far low end, and that's due to council's decisions over the last 3 terms of council, where we've consistently lowered the industrial tax rate in an effort to attract new industry to Chatham-Kent. When you add the property tax to the water rate, we again are on the low side, below both the group average and the survey average. This slide's a little busy, but and Don talked about it a little bit in his talk when he was talking about the population density per square kilometer, where Chatham-Kent only has 43 per square kilometer versus a lot of the other major centers. Whether it's our kilometers of roads, whether paved or gravel, our 850 plus large bridges, our 20,000 culverts, drains, the number of arenas and libraries and stuff are in each community. It does. There's a lot of facilities to maintain that. If you're one municipality with 104,000 population in one location, all crunched together, you might have a couple arenas and a couple branch libraries, but it would all be in one condensed area and some main parks. Sorry. What'd we do? It's back at the...
I know.
That would be a level of
Yeah, we'll just take a moment on this.
I don't know who's in charge of IT.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you were cutting in and out, so I thought maybe it was just the wire there, but it looks like it.
While we're waiting, following Gord's presentation, we'll hold any of our questions. We'll do the deputations, then council can ask any questions they might have. We'll get those answered. And a reminder, there's no motions or debate tonight. That would just be questions for clarification. Following the end of the formal meeting, there'll be a break, and then we will return for anyone interested for a presentation on financial sustainability.
That's from the, should we change it to,
Yep. That's done.
I'll shut that one off there, but.
I'm trying to go out of it a bit.
Yep. Shut that one off. I could bring it up on the podium.
Sure.
I think I need to move it to a common place.
Yeah, that's right. That's all applause.
Commissioner, this is not a ploy to get more IT resources.
Yeah, we're just gonna, Kurt's gonna plug in here.
I lost my mouth. There we go. I was in there.
I guess it.
someone's going to break out the overhead.
I think that's where we left off.
Yep.
Okay, I was just going over all the things that we already know about it. We're a large municipality spread over a large area with a lot of different facilities and assets to maintain. The next few slides are some tax information. They're in your package for council. It's information. There's really nothing I need to go over publicly, but just letting you know that there's details. Of course, there's different average assessment values within the various centers where I think Erie O and Erie Beach are some of the higher assessed areas because of the waterfront assessment there. And this is just a comparison of farms. This it says the average farm, but it's a mathematical average of all our farms. There's lots of very tiny, small farms, and then of course there's the large 200-acre farms and farmers that might farm 6 of those farms. But so this is an average. It's around a 50-acre farm, and what their average taxes would be for that farm, and what a 1% increase would be. And similarly for commercial, average assessment of a commercial property and an industrial property, how much taxes they would pay, and what a 1% would mean to them per 100,000. And the last column is the 1% per $100,000 of assessment of that facility. This what also was presented on Monday night is just a breakdown of that. Of all the taxes collected, where it comes from. So 68% is from residential and multi-residential properties at 101 million, 28 million from commercial properties, 13.5 million from farms, and 5.8 million from industrial. That's the part of the pie that has been shrinking over the last 20 years. It has increased recently because wind turbines are also included in that industrial piece of the pie. But overall, it just shows the emphasis on the residential tax bill. Again, much too information on the slide, but it's there for your information, just breaking down the individual communities and what their assessments are, where the taxes come from in those communities. This is an important slide, and it's especially for new councillors. It's a difficult one to see I think about. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the budget process and determining the budget. How much do you need to run the operations of the municipality of Chatham-Kent? You could raise services, which would require more money, lower services, or keep services at the current levels. That's all decisions that it's up to council to provide the direction where we want to go. So I like to think of it as the budget process bakes a pie. The tax policy, which will come in April, there's a couple of tax reports in April and May. That first tax policy report determines how you divide up that pie. Who pays for what? Are you shifting more to residential? Are you shifting, for whatever reasons, there's always some natural shifts going on. It has a lot to do with impact reassessments happening and particularly the farm class that's had a large increase in assessment. So we don't make any of those decisions now. I would warn you that sometimes when you read the media releases of some other municipalities, it sounds like they've joined them both together, and how they make their announcements. But we feel this is the fairest process to go through is just talk about the budget now. We'll talk about who pays later. This is some tax policy information. Really nothing that you need to pay too much attention to now. Basically, residential is the default set at 1, and everything else is a factor based off of residential. So you can see farm pays 0.22% of the residential rate. And the province has prescribed a maximum of 0.25% for farms, and similarly down through all the classes. I know when we're talking about new social housing units and multi-residential units being built, would also like to point out that there has been legislation back in 2017 that actually restricts any new development to only being at 1.1%. So it is quite attractive for developers to build new multi-residential properties now. And that's just a recent change. Other tax issues, other things that you can have are local improvement levies. The easiest examples is if a new water line goes down a country road or a new sidewalk. Shouldn't say sidewalk. We now pay for 100% of the sidewalks, but if a group wanted a certain new curbs and gutters or something on the road, that would be called a local improvement and would be added on their taxes, and they would have options of paying it up front or having it paid over 5 or 10 years, depending on the size of the dollar amounts involved. Area rating is where council has decided that this area is getting something different than their neighbors. So, an example I'll give you, in Ridgetown, we have curbside leaf pickup through this machine that goes down all the streets and sucks up the leaves in the fall. That's a service that the residents of Ridgetown want and they're willing to pay for, and so the rest of Chatham-Kent do not subsidize that activity. It's an area-rated service. Oops, what did I do now? Some more budget information. Mike and Don have talked about the OMPF. It is at risk. Based on the previous 2 years, what we have got, and just for example, in 2018, we did get about $950,000 of new money in the OMPF grant. We thought we were already being conservative, not knowing where the new government was going, so we only estimated $500,000 going into the budget. Turns out we perhaps were not conservative enough. We'll find out hopefully in the next couple weeks and have some more information by the 30th. Like we say, we had received no notice all throughout the fall. Whenever we would talk to the provincial ministries, they all said, yeah, it's on its way, it's coming. Really no worry. It wasn't until in late December where the province sent out a letter, and Amos also sent out letters warning us that there could be problems ahead. We immediately responded with a letter to the province highlighting the importance of this funding and requesting support of consistent program funding. And like I say, we hope to know more before we come back on the 30th. This is our assessment growth. So this is one of the highest assessment growth years that we've had, so it's very good news for our budget. We're bringing $2.1 million of new tax money from new things that are built in Chatham-Kent. So this is great news. I do want to caution council on extrapolating this going forward, because there was two major items in this amount. There's 600 under the pipeline line. There's the $680,000, which was the Enbridge Panhandle pipeline assessment. So that's new tax revenue that Enbridge will be paying us. And there was also a wind farm that went online this year that added $221,000 of new assessment. So if you take those two numbers out of the equation, because they were basically one-time special events, we are back down to the 1.2 million, which has basically been our consistent average over the last few years. Hopefully there's, with news on building permits and stuff, we hope that is growing, but that we'll have some good news in future years. But for now, we're going with the $1.2 million estimates going forward. And to briefly talk about Bill 148 and Bill 147. So in last year's budget, we spent a lot of time talking about Bill 148, the Fair Workplaces, Better Jobs Act of the Liberal government in 2017. There was the minimum wage increase from $11 and some cents an hour up to the $14 an hour, and there was many other numerous long list of new things that had to be put in place. It cost us $836,000 in last year's budget, and we funded that through a combination of new taxes, some increased user fees, and cutting some services with base budget reductions. Now, when the Conservatives were elected in June, one of the first things they put together was Bill 47, making Ontario Open for Business Act. It reversed almost all of the Bill 148 impacts and froze, going forward, the minimum wage at the 2018 rate of $14 for 2019 as well. So we have no increase in minimum wages to deal with for the 2018 budget. So we're able to give back to the taxpayers in this budget $554,000. And now to Mike for infrastructure.
Thanks, Gord. So we've talked a little bit about the asset management plan already, so we're just going to do a little bit of a recap on it. So the annual tax increases to get to full funding by 2037, talked about a 1% council approved this financing plan for those years. We're also supposed to take any decreasing debt payments and part of the AMP funding, so adding those debt payments actually to the infrastructure plan, and also adding inflation in as we go along. So the 2019 budget requires $101,800 from the approved categories. We have a reduction in our gas tax funding. They base our federal gas tax funding based on the census, because our census data went down. Our federal gas tax funding went down by $436,000, but fortunately we have an increase in the OCIF funding of the $1,834,000 of annual funding. So that brings us to the 1.499, which is actually 1%, plus the $550,000 for year 3 of the 3. So you can see that the actual tax piece is the $101,000 plus the $550,000. So when we talked earlier about 0.43% coming for taxes, that's the 0.43% is the bridge financing piece, and then also the $101,000 from the approved categories. So I know this slide is almost impossible to read, but what we wanted to do is really just highlight all the different asset categories that we have. If you can see the bottom line there, that's $95.6 million a year that we actually need as a requirement, and we're actually funding $50.7 million. So we're at about 53% funded coming into 2019's budget. And this is a little bit of a breakdown of that $95,636,000 we need every year. So it just kind of highlights to you what percentage of that $95 million a year that we need. So you can see that 32% of that is needed in the road network. 19% of it is for the bridges and culverts. Another close to 20% is for sanitary and storm. And then you can see all the other categories still have needs, but they're smaller needs in comparison. But those are certainly the big three categories. And certainly council has really focused on the bridges and culverts area in the last 3 years. Certainly the road network and the sanitary and storm network, you can see from this slide, is the two areas that we have the biggest deficits. So we still need over $16 million a year to make up the amount that is required for this combined and storm sewers, and the road network is $15 million behind. The bridges and culverts one, the large bridges and culverts, we're getting fairly close to being fully funded. It's the smaller ones that we still have a significant gap on, and then you can see facilities and structures, machinery and equipment still are short by between $2 and $3 million. So our overall asset management plan, so for everybody who may not have seen it yet, the recommendations that were actually in the asset management plan was a 1.4% increase over the 20 years. Apologize for the alignment. Sometimes it goes a little wonky. We have recommended a 1% in that time frame. The reason is because we believe that over the 20 years we can divest of certain assets, we can change certain levels of service over that time frame and actually be able to recoup that 0.4%, so that we believe that the 1% we can actually get there over the 20 years. As you can see there, council approved the asset management plan in January of last year. That was submitted to the province with the approved list of recommendations on the financing plan. We're just reiterating to council that that plan, by following that plan, keeps us eligible for any future federal and provincial funding programs. So it's important to try and adhere to the plan that we submitted to the province. Now we're going to just talk quickly about reserves. So as you can see, we've been able to accumulate a significant amount of reserves over the last number of years. The benefit of having good reserves is that you have the ability to react to any situation that occurs. It gives you the ability to do the right asset requirements that you need. A lot of it is saving for some rather large projects. When we've had some very large bridges that we've had to do in the last little while, some of those amounts are in this reserve and haven't been taken out of the reserve. The capital projects are predominantly finished on some of those large bridges and stuff, but we have to draw down the amounts out of the reserves. This is just a snapshot of our average contributions to the reserves over the last few years. So you can see that the amounts going into the reserves over the last few years has been going up, and we've averaged about $4.4 million of contributions to the reserves. Now, keep in mind that this is sort of excluding the life cycle component. We put that, $50 million into life cycle, and we basically spend that $50 million because we really should be spending more than that, but we spend the money that we get in life cycle. So this is really the other reserves. So you can see that our drawdowns out of those reserves over the last number of years is about $7.3 million. So there's some significant drawdowns out of those reserves over the last number of years. So for 2019, this is our recommended drawdowns from reserves. So you can see that there's the mandated reserves, assigned reserves, and the life cycle reserves. Now again, these drawdowns out of the life cycle are not for the capital project. This is for special projects that are being funded out of there. And then we had a couple of items that actually contributed for some base budget contributions to reserves. Some of them have gone through the community investment reserve, that we actually have some funds coming in that we've increased for, like Integris dividends or for the Ridge landfill. Some of those, we contribute those directly into those reserves, so that's why they're showing as a base budget contribution. But the recommended drawdown is $6.4 million from those reserves. So the impact on those reserves, so basically 2019 is an in and an out in 2019, and the average over the last number of years is about a $2.9 million decrease. So as again, we're going to just mention that we want to encourage that the reserves are used for one-time projects, funding specifically any items that you don't have a reoccurring expense for those. And then we do have some annual base budget contributions that are included in the 2019 budget to just ensure that council's strategic objectives are supported. And I'm going to turn it back over to Gord.
Thank you. Now just going to talk about some of the staffing changes. As we had it in one of Don's slides, we were talking about a net 8 base increase in FTE counts in this budget. But just to break that down in the details, under existing services, we've actually reduced the FTE by almost 7 FTEs. So those are 7 positions that are no longer needed, and it's not through layoffs. It's been through attrition. So there's no layoffs in that, and that saved $572,000. We reinvested that money into 14 and a half new FTEs, and all the details are actually in tab 9E of your binder. And as Don talked to in the opening, there's 8 of those 14 positions are really key strategic positions for the municipality. But as you can see, it costs actually very little in total. We have an 8 base FTE at a cost of $253,000. That's because there's some subsidy funding some of the positions in there. And then we have our one-time issue. So these might be a project that lasts a year or two. So it's not being added to base. A good example is the fiber project that's going on, where we have an extra person working on the permits to allow them to proceed. Those are short-term projects. We have 10 that's associated with existing services, and 13 that's associated with new services. And a lot of the funding from them are coming, they're one-time items, and the funding for a lot of it is coming from one-time reserve transfers. So the bottom line here, we have 31 positions in the net positions in the budget at a cost of $550,000, which is less than $18,000 per new FTE added. I know many of you are thinking that this presentation is too long. I'm going to gladly cut this in next year's presentation because our clerk, I'm happy to say that we have a 7-year retention record bylaw, but for some reason I keep on referring back 21 years to 1998. But for one more time, prior to amalgamation at January 1st, 1997, there were 13 and 21 FTEs in all of Chatham-Kent, in all 23 municipal communities. During amalgamation, 217 positions were cut. That left us starting as Chatham-Kent with 1,104 positions. And then we had the downloads that happened, and whether that was social housing or ambulance or just a host of things that were downloaded in the early 2000s, that added another 254 positions to the municipality. And over the last 21 years, we have added 23 net more FTEs to do a whole host of new services that we're providing. So 23 people over 21 years. It's not a bad record. So we start our year at 1381. In this budget, we are adding 8 base positions. So we'd be at 1389. This also is likely hard to see on the screen, but in your books, this is a future year forecast. What I would like you to know is on the line of OMP provincial funding change, when this slide was created, I was still forecasting that we would still be getting some transition funding flowed to us where it's proven that we deserve the money. So I was still forecasting increases. So in reality, my projection here probably is a little bit worse. And with all the unknowns of the province over the upcoming year of what their funding is, we could have other effects as well. So we're looking at a 3.5% to 4% tax increases for the next few years. That's one of the reasons is you will be funding 100% of your asset management plan unless new announcements come from the federal or provincial government to fund, and we'll be getting no new OMPF money, it looks like, going forward. But keep in mind that it's still only a cup of coffee, and I hate to say that term, but it is $1.96 to $2.25 there range per week cost to the average household. Sorry. Some other information in your package on. Sorry, I just have to look over here on tab 9G. We have the budget survey that we had out in mid-November and December. We had 968 visitors to that survey, and 270 people took the time to complete it. We're happy with the results. It's up about 40% more than it was last year. All the results are posted tonight on our 2019 budget page. And the goal of this survey is more to create awareness of the budget and to get people to give input to council. There is an open spot at the end where they can put any comment they want. We got 129 detailed comments, and respondents were from all corners of Chatham-Kent. It's, of course, not a scientific survey, and it's mainly for educational purposes and to get the word out about the budget. From the 129 comments, a lot of it was that they did appreciate us outreaching, and they learned something, and the other comments were a lot of support for core infrastructure funding and support for responsible spending. So tonight on our website is the entire binder that council has in front of them. Everything in there is on the website tonight, except for this presentation, and I'll explain that in a second. It has the time and location of all the community forums that are coming up next week. People can email the budget group any feedback or comments that they have, and there's a 2018 base budget overview. Tonight's presentation is being recorded by your TV, and we will have that AODA accessible version of that back onto the website next week. Information to come on the 30th at your first deliberation meetings is the Police Services Board presentation, but keep in mind all their budget dollars already are taken account in the 1.7 to 2.03%. So there's nothing new other than he's explaining what's in his budget. And we'll also have a closed session later that night where we go over the employment and labor relations presentation. Usually we put a slide here on where all other municipalities in the region are at, what have they approved, or what are their draft budgets. But with council just taking office in December, many budgets are being delivered this week or next week, and there really wasn't much information out there yet on draft budgets or approved budgets. But so we'll try to compile a list for the 30th council meeting if it's available. Just like to explain how our budget process works. So we're basically starting with the 2018 final budget that was approved by last year's council, and then it's a supplementary budget process where your binder is full of proposed changes, and whether that's a change to service levels or adding a new program. Our life cycle budgeting, staff or revenues, it could be in any area, and it could be a recommendation to increase or decrease. It's supplementary items. But as accountants here, we use the word supplementary for two different reasons, and so I just want to make you aware of this. It's a supplementary budget process, but when we get into the details, we'll be talking about base or sup items. A base item is an item that's going in there permanently. So if you're creating a new position or a new program, it's a permanent addition. A supplementary is, we really should use the word one time, because I think it'd be a lot clearer. But if you were to, if you were to open your binders to tab 6, where we're looking at the budget, you'll see there's a whole bunch of headings across the top, and we show the EMT ranking, and they have provided a ranking, and in the next column said where there's a B or a S there. So if it's base, it's ongoing. If it's S, it's just a one-time item. You also see under the EMT an A, B, C ranking of items too. So I just go through those quickly. A are the must-dos. So of course, net revenue generating. If we're going to get new money, you would of course take it. Or if there's something that's legislative that we have to do, or if council has dictated in the past that we must add this to this year's budget, such as the ambulance, that would be a council mandated item. Or that there's a required base budget adjustment, including the need to cover inflation that's fixed in contracts. Then EMT goes on to the should do category. So these are critical investments. This is the number one is the infrastructure and supporting council strategic direction. So if it's either of those items, it's a B1. B2 is a result of community is for community growth, whether a result of or to promote it. B3 is cost avoidance, has a payback or is a legal issue. And B4 is responsible to a wide community or corporate need for something new. And then we have the nice to dos, and EMT has a lot of work deciding what must we do, what should we do, and what, these are all great things on this list too, but they have ranked them as nice to do, that it's more a narrower need, or it's not critical at this time. D, defer. Sometimes there's a reason that, hey, it might be a great thing that we should do, but this isn't the year for any particular reason. And E, you'll see that a lot. E means there's another source of funding. So it might be a grant or some alternative funding, or it may be that it's a one-time item and we've recommended to pay for it from reserves. And T is that new area rated service. There's nothing in the budget right now as a T service, but if council was to bring up that a certain town wanted to add a new service, it would be area rated, because we don't have to worry about it being in the general tax rate. It's only charged to that town. And as Mike mentioned, we've already had base budget review and education sessions over the last couple of weeks. They're very well attended. And our next steps are our community consultations on the 22nd in Tilbury Tilbury, Dresden, and then on the 23rd, Blenheim and Wallaceburg, and back in Chatham on the 24th. And we will now move to deputations. There's one issue that there's been registered for deputations, and there's two individuals speaking.
Yeah, so I'll call forward Ryan Jackson and Wesley McDonald to give their deputation. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I am here today to present an idea that I think complements the CK Plan 2035 and addresses a need in our community. I am part of a group of road hockey players that come together every Sunday, and we enjoy a competitive and fun game of road hockey. We have a public group on Facebook, currently sitting at 223 members. You can find us at Official Chatham Road Hockey League. It was created in 2015 by a small group of youths looking to have some fun, and over the years the group has grown, and playing in an empty parking lot is very difficult. The group offers everyone the opportunity to play, regardless of age, sex, or skill level. We do not charge any money, making it attractive to low-income youth, and the opportunity to play with friends. The problem now lies that some days we see over 100 people in an empty parking lot, and our group faces the possibility of being kicked off the private property. We have looked at all our options and feel that the only solution is to have a place to play that can be enjoyed by anyone. We would like to propose that the municipality build an outdoor ball hockey court at Kingston Park, multi-purpose to include basketball. Ideally, we think it would be best if it was big enough for a 5 versus 5 game that could be sectioned off into 3 mini courts and offer 3 versus 3. The boards are there to contain the ball in play, and basketball poles installed around the outside hanging into play, and it's included in the photo that you're looking at. Why we are asking the municipality to build this, we believe that this could benefit the community by giving everyone access to a sport that many love and afford. It would provide an attraction to Kingston Park, which already offers a great splash pad and an outdoor fitness. And we believe this rink would fit into the overall image of being an outdoor recreational park. It also creates diversity by attracting other age demographic to the park. The main thing with this proposal is that it creates an opportunity for any event organizer, gives them an opportunity to reserve the rink and hold a fundraising tournament. Last year, our teams traveled to London, Windsor, Sarnia for charity fundraising ball hockey tournaments. London, in fact, has had huge ball hockey tournaments of hundreds of teams traveling to the city to take part in. In our league, we have players that come from Tilbury and Blenheim, Bell River, from Tecumseh and Windsor, and the occasional Sarnia and London player. The majority of the league's players do reside in Chatham. For this group, organized ball hockey can get fairly expensive, and not everyone can afford to play organized ball hockey. We have a great group of people who would put a rink built by the municipality to good use. Multi-purpose to include basketball will give other groups the same opportunity. It provides a safe place to play and gives youth an alternative activity to enjoy. I ask that you consider this for an investment in the Kingston Park and the people who live here. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Wes McDonald. I'm the owner of Candlebox Productions, which is a local film production and commercial videography company. Torch Media is Candlebox Productions' web media brand. Torch Media is Southwest Ontario's preeminent all-video alternative reporter. Torch Media publishes short news-style documentaries on a variety of hard news and human interest topics across social media and on our website. We offer sponsors geared to market video advertising, which means that we endeavor to match our content with the interests of our sponsors' target market. Our videos average 25,000 views in 1 week, and it's growing, and we combine cinematic filmmaking techniques with gritty video journalism. We are working with various publishing partners to extend our reach, and things are looking better every day. I've been playing in the CRHL for 3 years. In that short time, I've seen it grow, just as Ryan said, from casual parking lot games into a very competitive 8-team league with dedicated players that all value sportsmanship more than winning. We don't use referees, although we are organizing further and looking to do that this year. There's never been a fight or a serious injury that I'm aware of. I can tell you that the league has played an enormous role in my physical and mental health. Without it, I'd be less healthy, less happy, not to mention I'd have 3 less championships. I want council to know that if this ball hockey rink is built, Torch Media will be able to take the CRHL to another level by broadcasting those games across our platform, complete with play-by-play and color commentary, player interviews, net cameras, and of course corporate sponsorship. And the reason I bring this up tonight is because it's my hope that this idea will help attract funding to get this thing built. The facility will of course increase the quality of recreation in CK, but it also represents a business opportunity for this local entrepreneur. I'd like to thank the guys from the league for showing up tonight, and thank you all very much.
And Brock, before you, just letting council know that the copies of the presentation are under tab 9H.
Thank you. Now, if we have any questions for members of council, Councillor Solomon. Committee members, yes.
Yeah, okay. First, I gave Mr. Turner some questions that I had earlier, and I'm pleased to see that they're already incorporated into the report, so that's going to shorten my comments. What I'd like for all of council to receive in advance of the budget is a little bit more information. It may be someplace, but if it's on one sheet, it would help us. The amount we receive from Integris, the landfill payments, Dresden Slots, our wind turbine partnership, and I don't know how we classify the Rondeau payments anymore, whether they used to be grant payments, I don't, but if they still are and we have a lump sum, that would be helpful too.
They are still payment in lieu. Yep.
Okay, so if we had a sheet like that, and then one additional piece of information is that the new casino is projected to open in, well, they're pretty optimistic, but I've watched it go up in June. And if you have a projection of what that might be, and I also assume that we should, well, I'll wait on that. That's an assessment issue. Okay, and I think I had one other question, and that was just to help us out. To understand, you said 53%, we're funding our infrastructure to 53% level. I just wondered how, I mean, that sounds like we're only halfway there, but could you provide us at some point in time some comparators so we know what our other municipalities who are somewhat our equivalents are doing? So, I mean, if I don't know what it is, but I know 53 doesn't sound good, but it might actually be good compared to others. Who knows? But I think it'd be helpful if we knew. And that's all. Just some questions on helping us understand the stuff. We got a couple weeks?
Couple of weeks. We saw some nodding heads, so we can provide those.
Yeah, and you probably considered a lot of these things, because I talked to Mike before, but if we all had those kind of pieces of information, it might be helpful, especially people who are new to it and haven't seen these numbers.
Councillor Krupp.
I'm having trouble keeping these buttons straight. Just a couple clarification questions. There you are. So we talked about salting the sidewalks and that becoming the provincial minimum standard. Is that this winter control budget salt in brackets?
Through the budget chair to Councillor Crew, no, that's the actual purchase of salt itself.
Okay.
So a number of years ago, we cut $500,000 out of the purchase of salt budget. So that minimum maintenance standards issue is not included as a recommendation in the budget.
So when will we deal with that?
I think that there's some items that we're going to be dealing with that coming up in the future with some recommendations. I know Mr. Kelly probably has some comments on that as well.
Okay. And I just wanted to know where it was in here, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Budget Chair. So it's not in the budget whatsoever. What we decided at Council was that we would move forward with current level of services for this year. We would hold a public engagement meeting, a PIC.
Okay.
We'll be doing that in a few weeks, and then we'll come back to Council with a report and a recommendation.
Okay, so that will probably be next budget.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, all right. Just on tab 6, and it's nothing to do with any of the items, but under EMT ranking, and I understand, right, like should do, must do, and all that good stuff. A1, what does the 1 stand for? And then it goes down, it's A2A. What does that, like, what does that reference it to?
So if you want to go to the opening night presentation towards the back where we listed those A, Bs, and Cs, et cetera, it actually lists what A1, which is a revenue generator, and then A2A and
Okay,
A2B.
that's where
It'll show all of them on there.
It's in one of the pages. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi.
So just a couple quick questions. So the OMP partnership funding there, when you're kind of on the cusp about the 500, is it a potential to be basically, is that an all or nothing thing? Can it be coming in something at 250,000, or is it basically going to be we're going to get that or we're not going to get nothing at all? That's my first question.
Through the budget chair, we don't know, to be honest. The 500,000 was our estimate on what we believed we would get as an increased revenue. The 500,000 was based on them taking the transitional funding piece and moving it into the program. If they were to eliminate the transition funding in its entirety, then the 500,000 would basically be gone. If they remove more money than the transitional funding and actually reduce the funding more, our existing amount that we received in 2018 could actually go down. But again, if they decided to take half the transitional funding out and put the other part into the program, we could get some additional revenue beyond what we got in 2018. So we really don't know, but hopefully that they'll shed some light on that on the 23rd.
And then thank you very much. And through you as well, the chair, just another quick question. So Marjorie touched a little bit on one of the questions I had in regards to the salting. So in the briefing, you basically said you're looking for a quarter kind of to do over 4 years to increase the salting. So if something tends to change in regards to the maintenance level, and now we're providing that salt, that quarter is not really going to basically touch the increase to salt that would potentially come. So are we not going to be still running at a deficit in the salting department?
So once we have more information at the public consultation meetings and council makes a determination on what level of service we will provide, it is possible that we will need more money for that going forward, and that would be addressed in the 2020 budget.
Right. I think you're wondering about the 125,000 a year increase that we're recommending.
That's correct. Yes.
So that's for the existing road salt budget, nothing to do with sidewalks. In 2013 budget, 500,000 was cut from the salt material line without a direction to change the level of service. So now we have a budget of approximately $1 million for salt, and we're consistently spending 1.6, 1.7 million. Even last year, when we didn't have too much to deal with in November and December, we still spent $1.7 million in salt. That's a problem, and council should address. We're recommending to add 500,000 to that budget at 125,000 a year for each year of your term. But yes, there will be, in the short term, there'll be deficits every year.
Yeah, I understood that part. It's just and that was very great, the breakdown you got. I just thought that if we're going to continue to be a deficit, even if you increase, then it's only going to be a larger deficit in 2020 when we have this conversation. So is that going to then affect the 2020 budget if we're going to run at a sufficient deficit in that area?
So last year we did recommend, administration recommended in the 2018 budget to put the entire 500,000 back in and properly fund the account, and that was rejected. So we are doing a different approach this year.
I just want to touch on that. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the questions that I have are actually around slide 53 in the presentation around infrastructure. I believe my questions are directed more to Mr. Kelly. So just really around this concept of full funding with the 1% that we're allocating now through the 20-year plan to 2037. Is that full funding can I assume that by saying full funding by 2037, in the year 2037, we will have done everything that we've needed to do up until then, and we're in a strong position moving forward? Or are we still accumulating, infrastructure maintenance that we should be doing right now that we haven't? Like, just looking at this chart, the 2018 requirement and the budget was grossly different. So I'm just wondering what that state's going to look like in 2037, and then if there are any risks to the municipality for not investing more in infrastructure sooner.
Thank you, Budget Chair. So first of all, it's important to note that we are only recommending a 1% increase, and when we did the detailed assessment of the plan, the actual amount should have been 1.4% per year. So this council needs, to be fully funded in 2037 is to either increase higher than 1% or take a more aggressive approach to reducing our inventory of infrastructure. And that's what we've said here. We need to reduce it by approximately 8%. So that's what's key, to be there. I also want to point out, you talk about risks. There are a number of things that are not in our current infrastructure budget right now. And the one that concerns me the most is Lake Erie shoreline erosion. And that is potentially a very, very high price tag, and it is not included in here at all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, so before we take a break, we'll read a quick public notice. As per the public notice bylaw, Chatham-Kent Council gives public notice of its intention to hold public meetings and adopt the 2019 budget immediately following receipt of a recommended budget from the Chatham-Kent Budget Committee, and that the Budget Committee also gives public notice of the need to meet in closed session at any time during the budget deliberation process as permitted by the Municipal Act. And then we'll need a motion to adjourn the Budget Committee until 6 o'clock on January 30th, 2019. Following that, we'll have a break, and then we can come back for the financial sustainability portion if requested. So moved by Councillor Solomon, seconded by Councillor Finn. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, we're adjourned.